our next presenter is going to be like, hey, you know, how do we simplify all these regulatory requirements? Which is something a lot of people, I was having a conversation literally on YouTube with somebody just talking about SEC requirements and who has to and doesn't have to report. So I'm really looking forward to James to come up here and really kind of talk to us. Can we make it just a little bit easier and maybe shed some light on who's supposed to do what?
I, for one, would love to know.
And he's going to let us know.
I'm glad you guys had me on here to have that conversation today. So great to see you guys.
Love it.
So we can jump right in, James. I know I would like to mention, we have this new course, LDR 519, which is excellent if you're curious about that type of stuff. So we want James to jump in and talk about how to simplify.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you guys having me today. It's great to have this opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing, some of the research that's out there. And we're really, like you're saying, just to have an opportunity to talk about how organizations might be able to actually do some of that simplification. And I know a lot of you have seen some of the presentations that I've given in the past, and I'll just introduce myself a little bit too, just on kind of some of the things I've been working on here over the last 2 years. So my name is James Tarala. I've been one of the sales faculty members for, oh goodness, a little over 20 years now. So I've been doing this for quite a while. And a lot of the research I've been doing has been in the area of risk assessment for a big part of that time. And so whether it's regulatory requirements, risk assessment requirements, actually doing risk assessments, what I do in my day job is actually doing those kinds of stuff. So this is kind of where I spent a great part of my research. I had the opportunity to be part of the Center for Security, the work going on with CIS controls for probably 12 or 13 years. And then a few years ago, I actually started volunteering with another group, Cybersecurity Risk Foundation, to be able to do some of the things that we're talking about here today. And it really is part of a lot of the work that we were doing in our SANS classes and just things we were talking about with our students. We found ourselves in the situation we were doing is we're spending a lot of time telling people how to do certain things. And what we realized was that many things we were telling students how to do, we were actually doing as a part of our jobs. And we thought, well, why are we telling people how to do it? Why not we just show people how we're doing it and provide resources so you all can just sort of take advantage of that and maybe tweak the process as opposed to having to create this from scratch. So what I want to talk about today is not so much the reason why we do risk assessment. I'm not going to talk about business case for cybersecurity. I'm not going to talk about sort of how this fits into the why. But what I'm hopefully going to be able to do is share some of the tools that are out there that we can use to go ahead and make this process a little bit simpler. So that's what I want to focus on here today in the time. So at a high level, though, let's put this at a very, very high level. I want to know why we're doing risk assessment. Why is this a conversation we're having? And at the end of the day, just to put some context into this, if I could say the perspective that I'm going to bring to why I think we should be doing these things that we're doing is that we want to be able to do risk assessment to be able to identify missing safeguards in an organization's cybersecurity program that could lead to a threat being realized and thus an organization not able to achieve its mission. So said another way, we do cybersecurity in order to help the organization achieve its mission. We're enablers. At the end of the day, that's what we're doing. Right? We're trying to enable the organization to be successful to achieve its mission. And that's why we do what we do, right? We enable technology, its mission. That's why we're here. And risk assessment and risk management are components of cybersecurity that enable that process to take place. Risk and alignment. It's one of the ways that we have the opportunity to take some of the things that we're doing in cybersecurity and align them with what the organization's mission really is. And there's a lot of different lenses we can use to look at risk assessment. But for the most part, what you're going to see is that when I talk to students about the idea of doing risk management, risk assessment, the focus that I'm going to have in most cases is going to be on a safeguard approach or safeguard centric approach to doing that risk management. And basically, if I could maybe summarize this in a couple of ways, then what we've realized in looking at sort of the big picture of risk, there's really two main reasons why we do risk management. One is for the purpose of selecting appropriate safeguards. In other words, what are the good things as an organization that we should be doing in order to help us achieve our mission? So what are those good things? Should we do patch management? Should we do vulnerability management? What are the things that we should be doing? And then the second reason why we do risk assessment, or cybersecurity risk assessment or risk management, is for the purpose of validating those safeguards. In other words, number one, what should we be doing? And then number two, are we doing those things? And it's all really simplistic, but at the end of the day, that's really what we're trying to accomplish. That's the business purpose. That's where this all fits into the picture. And one of the things that we created over at CRF was we wanted to help organizations to visualize, well, what does that actually look like? And over the years, we've done quite a few different risk models trying to visualize, how organizations need to engage this. And a couple of years ago, we realized we were really trying hard to separate the idea of governance from risk. And that's fine. Like we can do that. And I think there are two separate topics. But what we realized was really probably the best way to understand where does risk intersect with an organization's operational responsibilities is to look at it through the lens of governance. And so what we did was we built a governance and risk model and showed how they overlay. And so the bottom line that you'll see there in the diagram really is the process of governance. Or what are the things that we do in order to govern an organization's program? Okay, so that's kind of the starting point there. And you can see we have things in place like program initiation, safeguard selection, education, asset inventory, right? These are the things that we do just to run our programs in general, right? So how do we enable cybersecurity to enable the business? Well, these are the things that we do to govern part of the process. But then if you see the wheels that are in place, the wheels are basically then components or subsets of that process. And those are especially places where risk management really overlays the process of governance. And we see those two main business functions. On the left-hand side, what we see is this idea of we're doing risk management for the purpose of safeguard selection, right? So the left-hand wheel is sort of for that purpose, things like threat modeling, doing mappings of threats, safeguards, and those kinds of things. And then on the right-hand side, the right-hand wheel, we do this for the purpose of safeguard validation. In other words, are we doing those things that we believe should actually be accomplished? Now, the reality though is, as I talk to companies, is as much as I'd love to say, every organization is out there, doing threat taxonomies and inventorying threats that need to be addressed, modeling those threats, prioritizing those threats, mapping those safeguards. The reality is it's very, very few, if any, organizations are actually going through that left-hand process. There's bodies in our field, right, in our industry that are focused on this, right? And groups like, SANS is contributing things, CRF is doing some work, and other organizations, NIST is doing a little bit of work in that space. But a lot of that research really hasn't been fully published. And so the end result is we end up seeing a lot of organizations getting access to safeguard libraries, but we don't see a lot of people getting full threat models or prioritization based on that. So that's just kind of the reality of where we find ourselves, if we're just honest. But what that means especially is organizations individually are also not doing that. And it's not to say that we should or shouldn't. I think this is a maturity process, and there's certain things we should be doing to focus on first. And if I had to get you to focus on doing risk assessment for the purpose of safeguard selection or for the purpose of safeguard validation, 100% of the time, I'm going to tell you validate your safeguards first. And when you have a pretty solid foundation of those things, then we could talk about the philosophies of going into the selection process. But the reality is most organizations just aren't there from a maturity mindset to get to that place. Literally, less than 1% of the population I've ever seen even having these conversations, let alone actually doing the work. So the majority then of what we're going to do more risk assessment is we're really focused on what are the things that we believe we should be doing? Like, what is that foundation? Are we going to follow a library that somebody else has created a custom library of safeguards? And what does that look like? And then how do we validate, are we doing those things? And so what I'm going to focus on really as we get into this today is what are the tools that we can use to help facilitate understanding, are we doing those things to help us achieve those goals? Now, if we step back for a second, it's not that James or Sam's or anyone is just saying, hey, this is something that you should be doing. Now, one of the things I talked about last year during this presentation, I appreciate everybody bringing me back again for sort of a follow-up. But one of the things I talked about last year was just there's a lot of regulatory requirements that people have that are coming out saying thou shalt do risk assessment. And literally there are dozens of these standards that are out there saying that you need to make risk management a part of what you're doing. So not saying necessarily that you're responsible for one of them on the screen here. These are just some of the popular ones I just picked that would fit into a couple of columns there on my slide. But for the most part, all of these at some point are going to say, thou shalt do this thing, right? You should do risk management, risk assessment as part of this. So again, it's not just something that James or CRF or SAMS or someone is saying, hey, you should be doing this thing. Reality is these regs are asking you to do it too. So having tooling hopefully will simplify this, make it a bit easier. Now, once you've decided you're going to do that, I think the next thing that we're going to have to decide is then, okay, so we've decided we're going to do this thing. Well, the next question then, of course, is, all right, to what degree are we going to do it? And or said another way, how much quality are you looking for when you're doing this work? And so when I'm in my professional practice, really what I find myself doing day in, day out is working with organizations to do assessments of the safeguards they have in place and be able to report back to them, to executive leadership teams, to boards of directors and say, okay, this is where we are. This is how mature we are. This is what we're doing well. This is what we can improve on. Right. And so we give that feedback. But when we're doing that as part of our sort of our daily lives, we have to decide going into those projects, to what degree of quality do we want to have going into assessment? Sometimes if you have an organization that's frankly not very mature, the easiest thing to do is spend fewer resources on the assessment and focus more on actually doing things to fix the problems. However, if you have an organization that's a little bit more mature, then sometimes it makes more sense to spend a little more time, resources on the assessment to look for gaps that people might not be aware of. And so there is a bit of a sliding scale when it comes to some of these things. So sometimes people get this idea of assessment quality and they're thinking to themselves, well, okay, well, I want the highest quality assessment I can get. Of course, that's what I want. But the reality is that might not always be appropriate. And there's a lot of times where a lower quality assessment might be perfect to give you just what you need to be able to create actionable next steps and move forward with what we're seeing. So what I mean by that is we talk about audit quality or assessment quality. What we're normally getting into is the idea of what's the quality of the evidence that we're collecting during this assessment. So you'll see here, I've created a model that I generally refer to looking at these 5 different levels of quality. And it really depends on the kind of evidence we're gathering and what goes into that assessment, the overall quality of the output that comes out of this. Level 1 is basically based on attestations. In other words, I come to you and I say, all right, I believe you should be doing these things. Are you doing these things? And I look to you for a response. And then I want you to come back to me and say, yes, I'm using this. No, I'm not doing that. But tell me what you're doing or not doing. And there's a couple different ways I can do that. Level 1, or sort of 1A I have here, is we can do that via questionnaires. You see this a lot, especially in third-party risk management or similar approaches, but I can send you a questionnaire. I can say, here's 50 things, 100 things, whatever it is. Are you doing them? How are you doing them? Answer my questions, send it back. And you can get a certain amount of response for that. The challenge, of course, with questionnaire-based attestation approaches is that the information you give me, first of all, may or may not be, call it honest. You might say, you know what? I don't want to tell you that I'm not doing this because I'm comfortable telling you that. So you don't. People exaggerate their capabilities, but people also just misunderstand. It may not always be an issue of honesty. It might just simply be an issue of, I don't know what the question means. It might be something simple. Like I'd say to you, okay, are you implementing application control? And you say, absolutely, right? We have endpoint detection and response in place. And, we're limiting which applications can execute. If it's malicious, we're blocking it. But when I say application control, that's actually not what I mean. And so there could be a misunderstanding maybe. And if I don't have the ability to question you to explain that well, that could lead to misunderstandings in the output. So we sort of have attestation based for both sides of level 1, but level 1A versus B doing interviews allow me to clarify. Interviews allow me to say, well, what I mean by that is this, and go into a little bit more depth. Or if it seems like you're kind of shaky on the answer, I can dig a little bit deeper and say, well, what do you mean by that? But it gives, again, a little bit of back and forth, and hopefully it helps us to ensure that the level of quality of the attestation is strong. Well, level 1 overall is just attestation based. Level 2, we can also say, okay, we can add documentation review to that. So say, okay, well, we're going to do this, what we're going to do output, we're going to do documentation review to also sort of attest that you've set your intentions. That's part of the conversation. So that's a little bit extra level of quality. We can also see, we can do direct observations to directly observe, are you doing the things that you said you're doing? So if I say, are you doing vulnerability management? And say, absolutely, James, we've got Tenable in place. That's what we're using. I'm like, great. So let's log in. Let's look at Tenable together. Let's see how it's configured. Let's make sure that we can see with our eyes this is actually working the way we expect. I did an assessment quite a few years ago, but I asked that question. I said, are you doing vulnerability management? It was an energy company. And they said, absolutely. I said, great. What tool are you using? And they said, well, we're using Rapid7. I said, perfect. Great tool. I said, well, let's look at it. And then I said, you're using it everywhere though? It's a great tool. He said, absolutely. They have like 35,000 nodes in their environment. And so we logged into Rapid7 together and started looking at it. Sure enough, I saw that there's about 300 devices in the system. And I said, well, this is weird. I said, you guys said you have about 35,000 nodes. And at the same time, I see about 300 here in the system. I said, it doesn't really match. What's going on? And they said, oh, well, we scanned all the nodes. We only have 300 licenses for the tool though. And so what we do is we rotate which of those 35,000 nodes we look at any given time, but we just use these 300 licenses. 1 month we might scan part of it, next month we scan a different part. But in months would go by without certain parts of the network being scanned. But see, I wouldn't have known that had I not looked at that tool with them, because they probably wouldn't have been straightforward about that, just doing an attestation. So I get a little bit extra quality by doing the direct observation as a part of that conversation. So that gets to add into this. We can keep going. We can talk about continuous monitoring and using data feeds for this process. We can add effectiveness testing or really pen tests into this process. But the higher we go in this, the higher the level of quality output based on the level of evidence that we get coming out of that system. But this matters going into the tooling conversation, because if we don't know what level of quality we're looking for, then it's hard to figure out what kind of tools we need. So for example, if we're doing, let's say, just attestation-based reviews, there's nothing wrong with that. But the kind of tool you need will be different than if you're trying to do, say, pen tests. So we have to make sure we understand some of the differences of what's our goal going through this process. So there's a few different kinds of tools that I would say are at your disposal if you want to be able to do this kind of work. And so again, let's go back to the beginning. So we say what we're trying to accomplish is we're trying to make this a safeguard-centric approach. And we say we're doing this risk assessment for the purpose of validating that we're doing the safeguards that we believe are appropriate. Then we need to be able to have tooling that allows us to track the status of those safeguards, possibly track the evidence we've gathered about those safeguards, possibly track exceptions to the implementation of those safeguards, something referred to as a risk register or something similar. And we need to be able to report an organization's compliance with the appropriate safeguards that we've selected. So if those are the goals then that we're going to have and sort of the requirements for the tool that we made, there's a couple of different options that we're going to have. And these are the things that I see people using sort of in real life to make this process simpler. We see some organizations using GRC or governance risk compliance tools, certainly very popular. Lots and lots of GRC tools out in the market today, very, very crowded vendor segment right now, but lots of tools in place for that. There's also tons of Microsoft Excel tools that are out there that you can use. Again, a lot of people fight Excel, but it's been a very, very traditional tool for this purpose. I know I've been creating these tools and giving them away, I feel like, for 15 plus years now to be able to do these assessments. We also have other tools for data and business intelligence, things like the CASM products, the cyber asset attack surface management tools, if you haven't seen those. Business intelligence tools are out there. So these are the kinds of tools you're probably most likely to use. But again, it depends on the level of quality you're looking for. So for example, if you're doing attestation-based, it's fine to use, say, a GRC tool. But if you're looking to use something that's a little bit more continuous monitoring focused, probably going to be more likely to use like a CASM or business intelligence tool instead to be able to accomplish that same goal. So let's start by just looking at just a couple examples of each of these and just sort of getting you to think through what might make the most sense. And all I'm really going to do here is I just want to walk you through some of your options. And at the end of the day, the goal again is that we know what the things are that we believe we should be doing. And then we validate that we're actually doing those things. And that's the focus. So what tools are at our disposal to help facilitate that process? Like I said, GRC is probably a very popular solution that a lot of people want to get to. And the nice thing is these are typically database-driven tools, often web-driven tools, and they give us the ability to do things like sometimes to do asset management, sometimes they'll do compliance tracking, they'll let us do evidence, they'll let us do risk registers. All those things we just talked about typically is why these GRC tools exist. Sometimes we'll combine GRC capabilities with configuration management database capabilities or CMDB capabilities, making this a little bit more continuous monitoring oriented. And sometimes these serve as sort of aggregators for information from other data sources, like you might connect it to a EDR system, or you might connect it to a patch management platform, vulnerability management, and pull data in from those feeds to go ahead and analyze the data. Most of these tools do end up being commercial though. And there's a lot of times they're out there, but they're written by teams that are creative in what they're trying to accomplish, to be able to look for tools or look for feature sets that will be useful for you to be able to communicate what the results are here. You see a couple examples here on my screen, a couple popular ones, ServiceNow, OneTrust. There's a bunch of these out there, literally dozens of these that are out there that you could potentially use. But a lot of times these are sort of the vision people have. Like people want to get to the point where they're using GRCs because they accomplish a lot of those things, those requirements that I mentioned. Another example of this would be a tool like Aramba. I mentioned them. They're an open source product. They do or I should say originally they were mostly open source. And so what would happen is you could download the tool, run it as a VM, set it up in your data center or set it up in a AWS space or something like that. But it does have commercial capabilities now. They sell hosting, so you don't have to host it yourself. But what they do is, so it's almost like a SaaS capability now. And you still can get the open source and sort of the free version, but see a lot of people who are using it do tend to go with the SaaS version now just to make it simpler. But the point being is, again, you can do all those things we just described. You can track your compliance against a regulation that you've decided you need to follow. It'll do risk tracking to be able to say, if you want to do risk registers and track those, it'll do project management. So the whole idea of these GRCs is that all those requirements I mentioned, they're going to try to accomplish those for you. So they're going to have the safeguard libraries defined. They're going to have a place where you can record the status of those. You can possibly upload evidence. You can track exceptions. So these really are fully featured suites. So the benefit is that they'll probably do all the things you need to accomplish those requirements that I mentioned just a minute ago. The downside that I'll say though too is a lot of people have great intentions when they implement GRCs, but they don't always have follow through. And if you don't do the follow through and you don't keep the data clean and usable, it's probably one of the fastest tools you'll find that people will abandon. People will just stop paying attention to it. And, for example, I've seen a lot of organizations in the last 2 years abandon Archer. And it's not that Archer's bad. In fact, I had a bank just this year who decided to go with Archer because they actually liked it the best of all the products. There's nothing wrong with Archer. But the problem is a lot of organizations who have implemented it never fully implemented it and stopped partway through. And next thing you know, their data is not accurate and people don't trust the data. People aren't going to use the tool. And I've heard kind of a good analogy. It's kind of like cameras. People will say, well, what's the best camera to get? And, the answer I've heard, kind of the best answer I've heard is the best camera to buy is the one that you're going to carry with you and the one you're going to use. And GRCs are the same way. If you're going to buy an amazing GRC, but it's so complicated, you're never going to use it and you can't socialize it and convince other people to use it, why are you using it? And so that would be the thing I'd argue. Great tools, amazing capabilities, but just make sure you understand your organization's appetite to actually follow through on this. If you're not going to allocate resources to it, this isn't going to help. You're going to have to care for it and feed it. Otherwise, what's the point? So again, just something there to keep in mind. So you think, dude, what else do we do then? If you're new with this journey, the thing I would tell most of you to do, if you don't have a GRC in place already, if you're just getting started, if you want something simple, just get your feet wet. I'm a huge fan of just using Excel to make this process easier for you. And I know, I get it. Everybody makes fun of Excel, right? Everybody wants to say, oh, it's just an Excel tool. Oh, it's just yet another Excel tool that we can use for doing risk assessment. But here's the thing. I've done a lot of SANS classes. In fact, I realized this month, actually, I've been an author for SANS about 20 years, teaching a little bit longer, but an author for about 20 years. And during that time, as I've written classes for SANS and tried to replicate labs and bring things into the classroom, I've tried all kinds of different experiments over the years. And I've tried to think, well, what kinds of tools could I bring to students to make it easy for you to just do the things we're talking about in class? And honestly, I've done all kinds of requirements definitions, kind of all these cool ideas of, hosted databases and VMs, of custom web interfaces, loading in the web server on a VM and all these different things. But none of that really was portable and something easy to use for you to bring back to your office. And I kept asking myself, what are the things that you might actually use? And bottom line, long story short, Excel always won. It does the job. It helps us accomplish what we need to. Portable, you can share it, easy. We all know how to use it. And I've heard so many auditors sort of make fun of it, but at the end of the day, it works and it does what we need. Now, when you get to the point where you've done a lot of this and you're ready to invest and go to the next level, GRC definitely makes sense. But if you're just getting started, I would definitely have to get started with this. And the example that you see on the screen, this is one of the tools that we've got posted using the Cybersecurity Risk Foundations or CRF safeguards as the safeguard library. And what we've done is we've created one of the more recent versions of our Excel tools. We posted there at crfsecure.org for you to go ahead and download and try out. A lot of you probably remember for a lot of years, we hosted information over at auditscripts.com. One of the things that we've done here just recently is we've kind of upgraded everything we were doing. And I can go into a long story of the backend architecture and sort of the serverless system we've designed and such. But long story short is we went ahead and upgraded all that now to the Cybersecurity Risk Foundation site, updated all of our tools and made them available for folks there. So Again, this is one of the free tools that we give out there for folks to be able to grab. And again, the idea of it is that you could ask yourself questions, answer those questions, and then get results. You'll come back to that. And sort of the theory of that is, we just have these simple Excel tools where what you can do is say, okay, here's the safeguard. You guys see a screenshot there on the screen. And what we do is we say, okay, here's the question you're asking yourself. Right? And we've already said that this is a safeguard centric approach. And so we are giving you, in this case, we're giving you using the CRF safeguards as sort of the foundation. So we've defined the safeguard library for you, but you could follow this approach for any safeguard library you want to follow. Your own internal policies, regulation you have to follow, something your auditors want you to fill out. But anyways, what we've done is we've said, okay, well, here's a list of safeguards that we think are appropriate. And then on the right, what you do is just a drop down box there. You just choose the status. So are you doing that safeguard or not? And to what degree? So you go through, you choose from the drop down list, you answer the questions. As you answer those questions, then what happens is you get aggregate scores. And so we have a dashboard page on those Excel sheets where what we can do is we can report back to you in a couple different ways. One of the dashboards, again, this is literally just screenshots from an assessment that I did earlier this year. And so you see in this time, the organization, you can see their maturity. And what we've done is we've looked at different maturity levels based on particular scopes. And we made a couple of changes. Some of you have probably been aware of our tools. We've been doing this for, like I said, over 15 years now. We've been giving these tools away. But you can see we're doing this on the 5-point scale. And what we're looking for is, all right, how mature are we at implementing safeguards in each of these topics? And so you can look through there and you can see, okay, well, I can see the governance team, 3.1, the endpoints, 3.2.8, server team, though, 4.4.3. So, I mean, you kind of get in a sense, okay, well, the server team is doing pretty well here at this. The network team is doing pretty decent. But maybe the developers, 2.19, maybe that could use a little attention. Maybe that's an area of focus you need to have. But what it allows you to do is it's sort of organized by team, right? By operational team. So you can see where you might need some additional investment or where you might have gaps. We've also done this by sort of aligning it against what we call the CRS maturity model. We've been using CMMI for a million years, it feels like, but the problem we run into is that CMMI is great, except it doesn't help us prioritize the safeguards themselves. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to create a model that would have both the maturity of the safeguard as well as prioritization of the safeguard and be able to put those into our measurements. So we created the CRS maturity model, and you can see the pyramid diagram that's there for the different levels and such. But this is sort of another one of the free resources we put out this year for the purpose of just helping people think about safeguard libraries in light of prioritizations and maturity, not just saying, okay, well, here's a list of a couple hundred things. Are we doing them all equally the same? Because they don't all have the same value. So we wanted to make this easier for organizations to be able to focus and prioritize, what's really important as I'm answering these questions. And so then what we can do, again, just using the same Excel sheet there, is you can go ahead and just see as you answer those questions, is you can see, okay, am I doing all of the foundational safeguards, or those bare minimum things that everybody needs to be doing? And if I'm not, so if I'm using this tool, for example, and there's something less than 5 in that foundation category, that's probably something you should look at. I know one of the things our assessors will do is they're going out and actually doing these assessments is they'll ask, all right, well, what sort of recommendations? How do I prioritize my recommendations based on the results here? And we always say, and we look at that level 1 bar first. And if it's not a 5, we say, well, what will it take to make that a 5? Because these are the sort of bare minimum, like due diligence safeguards that we need to have in place. And once you've done that, of course, we're going to have to focus on hygiene. And it really is that simple. We're trying to demystify some of the work that goes into these assessments. We're trying to say, okay, answer the questions. So go through the questions are pretty straightforward. Then when you're done, you get these automatically in your dashboard. If you have level 1 controls you haven't done, fix it. When that's done, go to level 2. When that's done, go to level 3. Not that complicated. And we really are trying to simplify that process of doing risk assessment. And that's, again, goes back to kind of the title of the presentation today, is we're trying to find ways to make this as easy for you as possible. And that's what some of these Excel tools are trying to do, is make that easier for you to go ahead and bring this back to your organization. Try to answer these questions for yourself and see what you might want to do next. So again, another tool, you can go ahead and it's all part of the same Excel tool that's there. We also have some other ones. If you do find yourself in a situation, let's say you want to do something like HIPAA, or you want to do something like NYDFS, right? You see on the screen there, example. We have a lot of times where people will ask for specific Excel sheets based on, whatever their standard is. So it's really easy to take the format that we have in place there. And again, if you think about it, all of those safeguards are just string values. So you could copy and paste and basically make whatever whatever scoring tool you wanted using that same format. So a lot of times people will ask us to make specific scoring tools based on specific standards. So on occasion, we'll do things like this. You can see here, I did a NYDFS assessment a couple of months ago. And so I just said, all right, well, I'll go ahead and make myself a tool based on the Second Amendment that they put out here just recently. So using that as another measuring tool. So, but again, you can kind of see Excel works perfectly well for doing that. And you can see some of these dashboards. And at the end of the day, what we're finding is that we can use these kind of capabilities to just show leadership where the gaps are and help them make better decisions. Because at the end of the day, whether you're using a GRC or whether you're using Excel, at the end of the day, we're giving people data so they can make better decisions. We're trying to reduce uncertainty so we can make these better decisions. And the hope is that by measuring things like we see here, even in Excel, we're able to reduce some of the uncertainty your organization might have. And then you can use that to make better decisions. That's the whole point of what we're trying to accomplish here. If we want to go beyond that, there's a lot of really cool tools we could get into as far as looking at automation, getting into continuous monitoring. I know it's probably not enough time here today to get into a lot of detail, but if you're to the point where you've done a lot of these Excel tools, or maybe you've already done some GRC work and you want to do some automation, one of the tools that I would probably have you look at, or the area that I'd have you look at first, is probably the Cyber Asset Attack Surface Management, or CASM products first. I know CMDB is amazing, and I definitely do CMDB at some point. I think there's a lot of really great capabilities that CMDB has. But at the same time, if you're looking for easy and simplifying and a place to start, I might spend some time on the CASM products. These are relatively new. They might be new for some of you. You might not have seen these. But what they'll do is they're set up in advance to integrate with a lot of the existing tools you already have, like vulnerability management or EDR or your cloud service providers or whatever it might be. And what they do is they have the ability to connect into those systems, pull data via API from those platforms, and then normalize the information to present risk to you based on what they've discovered. And there's a lot of tools in that space. Full disclosure, Exonius, one of the students instructors, Larry Zeltzer, a good friend of mine, is one of the, or is the CTO, right? So, Sans has been highly involved there for a long time. Run Zero, if you've heard of HD Moore and some of the work he did in Benesfleet years ago, he's involved with that project. So the community has a lot of those folks involved there. Would I start with this? Probably not, right? This wouldn't be probably the first place I'd get started. But at the same time, if you're looking to start doing some of that automation, this might be the kind of product you might start looking at down the road. Just an example of this, we'll look at Exonius just real quick here. Again, this is one of those tools that can help with things like asset inventory, business impact analysis, doing integration with data points, and sort of where they really thrive is the ability to do those integrations for you. Now, as you have more time, as you want to build your own integrations, some of the best examples I've seen of this aren't organizations that have gone out and bought one of these tools, but organizations rather that have gone out and actually built their own. Just an audit of an organization a week or so ago, where what they had done is they had built a data lake and they had ingested information from each of their security tools and their security stack into that data lake, and then just created custom dashboards pulling data from the data lake that they had normalized. So, those are the kinds of things I'd love to see you consider at some point. But as a stopgap measure, getting in that direction, these CASM products might be something you want to look at as sort of a more of an easy button or a simplified button to get you where you're going if you're not quite ready to start your own development project there. The other one you may want to consider, just as sort of one last final note here, is looking at tools like Power BI or Tableau or some of the business intelligence tools. They're kind of they're the nice middle ground maybe between a CMDB or a CASM product. So maybe you're not ready for custom development, maybe you're not ready for CMDB, but you still want to pull data from your existing tools. One of the things that you could do is you could use a tool like Power BI or Tableau or something, connect to the APIs that exist for your existing toolkits, and then go ahead and run reports directly from those APIs. So you could make a dashboard for your EDR. You can make a dashboard for vulnerability management. You can make a dashboard for whatever. But all you have to do is connect Power BI to that API and then run your reports, create your dashboards, and then decide what sort of actionable intelligence you want to take out of that platform. And I've seen some really interesting things with Power BI, especially these days, where what organizations are doing is they have Power BI developers and they just focus on, how do we grab data from these locations where we have information sort of pulled up. And the cybersecurity teams I'm finding are starting to get involved in this now, where they're starting to do their automation using these tools, as opposed to trying to doing full CMDB implementation, which a lot of times can be daunting for organizations. So again, kind of a stopgap measure, something to look at if you're looking for another option on the way. At the end of the day, we know organizations need to do this. There are regulatory requirements. We know there's value in this. Our leadership teams are asking for it. Our boards are asking for it. We know we need to do risk assessment. So a lot of us may or may not have the mandates. Doesn't mean we should do them. I still have this impression that we all benefit from doing risk assessments. So there's a lot of tools that are out there. If you've never done this before, don't make it hard. Take Excel, make your own tool, download one of ours, lots of options. If you've been doing Excel for a while, you want to track results over time, you want a little more richness in your reporting, look at the GRCs. If you've done the GRCs for a bit and you want to go ahead and grow what the options are there, look into the CASM products, look into the CMDBs, look into things like the automated tools that are in place. Again, you can increase the quality of your assessment work by using some of this automation that's there. And that's why we took the time to explain that quality piece of it. But whatever piece of this you're at, whatever part of the journey you're on, pick a tool, right? Pick a couple of these tools and decide how you're going to show leadership exactly where you're at. I really do believe one of our core responsibilities, one of the best things we can possibly do in our role is report to leadership exactly where things are. That way they can make the decision. They can figure out what they need to support the business. That's why we're here. That's why we do what we do. So all that being said, if you look for some other resources, lots of good tools out there. If you haven't looked around, again, we've moved a lot of our resources over to cybersecurity.org. So a lot of things there you can go ahead and look at, grab some of the tools that I mentioned here today. We've got a webcast we did just a couple of days ago on the cybersecurity standards scorecard. It's kind of cool this year. We automated pretty much everything in the scorecard this year. We're very excited. It's the fourth time we've given this presentation, fourth year in a row now, and moved everything to a automated model. We're very, very excited about that. So if you're looking to understand some of the different safeguard libraries that are out there and some comparing, passing between those, check it out. Like I said, we just posted it here just recently. We also, if you want to learn a little bit more, like Stacey mentioned earlier, right? We've got a couple of courses here we put out to kind of explain this. Certainly we can't do justice in an hour, but again, you see a couple of the courses we put out there for there. Maybe just some further resources to check out if you've got a little bit extra time. But Rich, Stacey, thanks for having me. I appreciate you bringing me here today. I only have a little bit of time and it feels really quick to give some ideas, but I don't know, hopefully we gave you guys a couple ideas to think about for simplifying the process.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much for your talk today. I was really excited for this.
No, it was great. A lot of great comments, James. You're going to have a lot of people reaching out or at least trying to have questions answered at some point. A lot of great stuff.
Absolutely. Happy that people reach out.
Yeah. Thank you
so much. Now where we get to go, we like I said just before, we're slowly like branching further and further out.